You listen here. The coal we mine makes steel, Homer. And if steel fails, this country fails. If you had half a damn brain in your head, you know that.
Okay, retro go. Final go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 272. And our movie this week is 1999's October Sky. And here to talk with me about it, because they had seen it, I had not, it's Jonathan Bush. Jonathan, how you doing?
Doing all right, Travis. How are you?
I am doing okay. So, October Sky. This was one you brought to me. You wanted me to watch this. So, give me a quick history of of this movie with you.
Yeah. Okay. So I first learned about October Sky when it was first called The Rocket Boys, based on a book called The Rocket Boys by Homer Hickam Jr., who grew up in a small West Virginia coal mining town in the 50s. Watched Sputnik go overhead, and soon after that, worked out that he wanted to be a rocket scientist against all odds, as you do. And so the book and the movie is about his struggles, especially with his dad being a super at the local mine. And just a lot of you'll never get out of West Virginia. Oh, you want to be a fancy rocket guy, all of that. But I heard about it because filming was going to happen in and around East Tennessee. A lot of filming, at least. Where I'm from Knoxville. And so it actually kind of came in contact with me because members of our high school band, of which I was one, some of them, not me, got to go and play in the movie in one of the opening scenes. And it's filmed at my middle school. It's in and around some places in Knoxville as my high school fight song. It has friends in it, all of that. And so, of course, when it came out, I had to go see it and saw it. And actually, despite all my connection to it, just really loved it. And since then, it's just always been one of those kind of back pocket movies. If you want to see a really Hi, Kat. If you want to see a really good, solid, yes, a feel-good movie, but a really good, solid, emotional movie that kind of takes you somewhere, it's just such a good go-to. And I just love sharing it with people. And I mean, it's Jake's first movie. It has all kinds of like kitsch in it and all kinds of stuff, and it's just really, really great. And every time I've watched it, it seems to hold up. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So comes out in 1999, directed by Joe Johnston and starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Laura Dern, Chris Cooper.
Chris Cooper.
And so I remember seeing stuff about this movie when it was coming out. I don't know why I didn't see it. It just sort of came and went. Like,
it's that kind of movie, honestly. It's just it's like there and it stands, but it's still under the radar.
Yeah. And I think too, I wouldn't say I was too old for it, but I was in that late teens kind of angsty period where I'm looking at stuff like Fight Club in 1999, right? And things like that. And a movie like this didn't grab me at the time. And so then it just became out of sight, out of mind, where it's like, oh yeah, I remember there was a movie called October Sky. I'm going to say full disclosure, by the way. So earlier this week, you posted on Threads, I believe it was, hey, I'm watching October Sky, getting ready to talk with Travis about that this weekend. And I'm so glad that you did, because I had conflated what movie you told me about, and I put it in my spreadsheet wrong. And so up until then, I had myself convinced we were watching Fire in the Sky, which is a very different movie from this entirely. And so,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, I just missed this one. And the funny thing about it is,
Sure.
I like Joe Johnston's movies because he
Mm-hmm.
does exactly what this movie did. He did Captain America: First Avenger. He did The Rocketeer, which I absolutely love, and I've talked about on this show.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this way of doing these movies that are, yeah, there's a little bit of cheese in there. There's a little bit of
Oh, for
kitschiness to
sure.
it,
Yeah.
but there's an earnestness behind it, and he gets people in them. Like The Rocketeer, I love The Rocketeer, and I've beat the drum on how much fun that movie is for years. And it was kind of one of those that was sort of a forgotten movie for a long time. It's gained a
Mm-hmm.
little traction the last few years, especially as it hit Disney Plus and was available
Of
there.
course, yeah.
But there was that period of time where like I knew a lot of people that hadn't seen that or forgot about it. And what I
Mm-hmm.
loved about The Rocketeer was it was positive, it was heroic, and it gave you like a good feeling. You just felt
Sure.
good when you got done watching it. I got
Mm-hmm.
the same thing here. I got the exact same thing
Awesome.
here.
See, I've never seen The Rocketeer, but I do remember it. Like I remember it like
Mhm,
at the time. I think I was like maybe 10. And but I do remember about it,
mhm,
and there was like brief kind of stuff about it when steampunk came back in vogue. But
yep.
like I I actually planned to watch it in preparation for the show just so I could compare it. I didn't know if you'd ask me back if I didn't, but but I didn't get the chance to do that. But it's funny you say that because I wondered if it's like the same, not just even the same vibe, but just like the same magic, but still its own singular
Yeah,
thing. And
absolutely.
that sounds like
Because
yeah.
yeah, what The Rocketeer did so well, and I talked about it on the show, but what it did so well was it gave you that old school comic book feel of a movie
Hmm.
and an adventure, and it's set in the late 40s to early 50s. I think it's in the 40s because I
Hmm.
or just post World War II.
Hmm.
And it gives you that just feel of like kind of the feel that like the first Indiana Jones gave you, where it's just adventure, right? But
Hmm.
toned back a little bit in terms of the scariness. It's more PG than PG-13.
Right.
Um, but I get that same feeling here. And then on top of that, like this movie I mentioned, but Jake Gyllenhaal, first starring
Yeah.
role. He's what, 17, 18 making this?
Yeah. 16 to 17, he said in an interview.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he's phenomenal. He's really good.
He's so good.
The thing that's impressive is he's playing a real person, which is
Yeah.
never like
Mhm.
I can't imagine because
You
I've
don't want to
done
do a biopic on your first outing. Like, holy
right,
crap.
exactly. Like I've done a little bit of acting. I'm not very good at it.
Hmm.
I never took classes for it. I didn't do a lot of drama in school, but I
Sure.
appreciate good acting. I can't imagine doing a biopic in general. Like I feel like that's such a
Hmm.
tall order to do. But for it to be the first movie that you're really making, like your first starring role,
Hmm.
and you're doing that, just feels so daunting to me. But he really he did such a great job embodying a character that is full of hope,
Yeah.
and then on top of that he worked off of another phenomenal actor in Chris Cooper playing John Hickam, his father, just
Yeah.
crushes it. He is fantastic in this.
He's the real MVP of this movie, I think. I heard on some other podcast somebody say, I'm not going to rehash all their material, but they said that they feel that Chris Cooper is really what holds the movie together, and that without him, even as good as Jake is, there isn't exactly a standout. It's just all a solid movie. And that
Yes,
Chris is what sends it places, and I totally agree.
because he has the job of carrying the emotional weight and
Hmm.
dragging the emotional weight along. Because so
Sure.
this movie is about Homer Hickam, who Homer H. Hickam Jr. is the person.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and
spoiler alert, his dad wasn't really named John,
yeah,
turns out.
um, and at first I was like, well, why did they change it? And then when I was reading about, they changed his name to John for the movie because they didn't want to
You don't
confuse
want to be
people.
talking about Homer and Homer all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that made sense. Um,
Hmm.
so but he, the story is about him and about his friends and getting into rocketry, but
Sure.
it's also so much a story about a family in this rural West Virginia mining town in the
Hmm.
1950s and everything that
Right.
brings along with it. And what I loved about Chris Cooper in this, I have so many of my notes as I was watching it are
Hmm.
about him and about the emotion that he brought to stuff and about how he's not a bad guy. He is the antagonist in this film.
I was going to say he's not like anti-hero, but
No, but
yeah, he's the grit in the hubcap.
yeah, he's the opposing
Yeah.
force. Like Homer wants to get into rocketry. He wants to go to space. He wants to do something with his
Hmm.
life. And John is the opposite of that, who is,
Not having it.
yeah. And the thing about it is the character of John Hickam, that's all he knows. All he knows is this
Yeah.
mining town and this mine and this
Hmm.
kind of work and working with your hands. And,
Hmm.
you live here, you work in the mine, and the mine is everything.
Yeah,
And
like I don't know if people really understand this about mining towns,
mhm,
especially like old ones, especially in West Virginia. The mining company literally owned all
yep.
of the property of the town.
Hmm.
They owned your house. In the movie it said that the company owned half the furniture they had.
Yep.
They own everything. And I actually went to school in West Virginia for a little bit. Um, and one day I was out just driving around. It's a place called Beckley, which if you've played Fallout 76, you know that is in
Hmm.
West Virginia. And I was just driving around in the hills on the old highways. Um, and I came upon this huge octagonal company store that was like the size of a half city block.
Yeah.
And obviously it wasn't still there, but it was just so looming. And it's just like that was the heart of this town.
Hmm.
And in the movie, when Homer blows up the fence, she says, his mom says, I had to wait 6 months for the company carpenter to
Yeah.
come do this fence. And it's like everything hangs on that economy,
Yeah.
all of it. And in fact, sorry, one more thing. When they talk about, um, at some point in the movie, they talk about a forest fire out near town called Welch. And they talk about how much timber went up. Timber is a commodity. They were
Hmm.
thinking in terms of what money the town lost, not
Yeah.
just like wildlife or anything like what we would consider first now. It's just everything revolves around money and
Yeah.
around the company and around that mine. And like John said several times, if the mine dies, the company dies.
Yeah. And it's almost a foreign idea to us currently when you really think it would be as though, and we sort of I mean there's a little bit of that with some of the companies like say in Amazon where they'll have these
Oh,
warehouses that
sure.
are Amazon owned and they're doing it, but take that and expand it so an entire town is built around
Hmm.
a mine and everyone works in the mine, and if you don't work in the mine you work in the store that's also owned by the company that owns the mine, and they provide all
Yeah.
the goods that you buy. You're getting paid and then you're paying the company to buy things. Like
Hmm.
it's a crazy idea, but
They
these were
truly get you coming and going.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And it was a thing. And
Yeah.
what I because the character of John, that's all he knows, and that's what he wants like any parent, he wants better for his kids than what he's got, but also
Sure.
what he knows is that. So like Jim, the Homer's older brother
Hmm.
Jim, is
Hmm.
the big strong football playing guy. He's one of the, as the principal puts it, one of the lucky ones that can get out of the mining town with a football
Hmm.
scholarship. But as far as the people in this town kind of go, like that's your only way out. Your only way out is to do that because it's just so hard to do anything else. Like it's hard to get
Hmm.
because because so much of the economy is tied into the company, paying for college is really difficult. So it's hard for these kids to get out of there. And
Yeah.
and so like a lot of the butting of heads with Homer and John was just this difference of ideas of like Homer wants out and he wants to follow his dream, and John wants his son to, have a good living, and the only thing he knows is the mine. And so he's just assuming, well, Jim's going to go play football somewhere, you're going to end up working in the mine. And even one of the other guys, Roy Lee, even says like, I'm going to end up working in the mine. I've known that my whole life. Like,
Mhm.
he's just resigned to that fact as a
Mhm.
17, 18-year-old, that this is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
Um, and so I really loved all those emotional moments, because there were so many moments where John loved Homer. Even if they didn't get along, even if they didn't see eye to eye, he cared about the boy,
Yeah.
and he wanted things for him, but he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know how to show that in any other way.
Yeah.
And so like there's that moment where at one point he comes down and he sees all the rocket stuff again, and he's like, I thought they got rid of all this. He's like, well, we got it all back. He goes, okay, cool. Well, you know what? You can have your hobby. That's fine. But just,
Mhm.
get working again, because he was so happy with him when Homer has
Yeah.
to go work in the mine.
It was the happiest that he was in the entire movie. He was like elated to see him down there.
Yeah, because he knew the older brother wasn't going to do it. He was off to play football. That was his
Yeah.
calling.
Mhm.
And he just assumed that, well, if the younger kid isn't playing football, then he's going to be working in the mine. That'll
Mhm.
toughen him up. That'll make a man out of him, like all this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And he was so pleased that he's there, and he was so proud to have him there. And it's like Homer did that because he was following the example of his father, right?
Right.
Which makes
Mhm.
that, and we'll get to the ending and what he says to him at the ending in a little bit,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
like what he says to him there hits really hard because of the events that happened throughout the movie.
Mhm.
Because John is a company man, right? He's
Right.
the super, he's the foreman.
Through and through. Yeah.
And that was a thing that they explored a little bit in this, with like the miners
Mhm.
going on strike at one point.
Mhm.
Um, but it wasn't the main thrust of the movie, so they didn't dive too deep into it. But like him as a company man, he he cared about every one of the guys working, even if he didn't like the union, and even if it
Mhm.
was, it annoyed him. Like at the same time, those were all
Yeah.
his guys, and he was
Sure.
going to take care of all of them. So we get that right
Mhm.
at the beginning. I love that moment right at the beginning where he saves the guy, and
Mhm.
they pull him up, and like Homer comes up and sees him, and he goes, "Ah,
I saw that too, and I put down. So he walks up and he saved the guy, and he's like so proud of him, and it's like, that's my dad, smiley emoji, and then
yep,
his dad calls the guy who got hurt a son of a bitch for getting hurt, and then Homer is like, that's my dad, sad emoji.
yep, exactly." Like you saw both sides of John right
Yeah,
there.
in the span
Um,
of about like 20 seconds.
yep. But yeah, Chris Cooper, just, I mean, I was drawn to him in every scene. And I saw an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal talking about making
I
this
think he's
movie.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
probably saw the same one.
this was so good.
But
This
imagine you're a 17-year-old kid, you're acting in your first like feature, in your first starring role. And I love the way he
Mhm,
put it, because they have the classic scene in any drama where your two
mhm.
main characters duke it out, right? They're
Yeah,
yelling at each other. And
yeah.
Gyllenhaal talked about like, I'm doing this scene and I'm thinking I'm crushing it, and I'm yelling and I'm screaming and all that. And Chris looks at me and he goes, I don't think you're listening to me. He's like, you need to stop and just listen to the words that I'm saying. And he's like, I did that. And then he would say them and they were making me angrier.
And
And
it
like,
set me off, yeah.
and it set him off, and it worked perfectly. And that's such good acting advice. And he, and then for Gyllenhaal to be like, I took that as great advice as an actor, but also just as a
Mhm,
person, as a human,
mhm.
to listen
Yeah,
more and use that. And that scene works because of it. You can feel the emotion between the
right.
two of them that's been building
Mhm,
throughout the movie.
Right.
and it came to a head there, and it was very, very good without
Mm.
ever coming to blows. So it didn't get physical
Mhm.
between the two of them, and it went exactly like that argument is going to go.
Right.
And so I really liked it. I really liked that, and I liked John as a character constantly showing like he was real hard on Homer.
Oh yeah.
And he was real tough on him, and he did favor Jim and all of that kind of stuff. But you also got these moments of like how good of a person he was when they see. So after the boys get arrested, so I liked that, right? Because they're lighting
Sure.
off their rockets and all that kind of stuff, and then they end up getting arrested because of the forest fire that got started.
Mhm.
And that scene right there is when he picks him up for the police station is a perfect encapsulation of their relationship, right? Because they're coming out of there,
Mhm.
and you've got John and Homer, and John tells him, you know, I've been pissed off at you, and I've been angry with you, but this is the first time
Mhm.
I've ever been ashamed of you.
Yeah.
And
God.
like the gut punch of that, and then no more
That's the
there.
worst thing you can hear from a parent. Like
Oh,
screw like making them mad just that they're disappointed in you.
mm-hmm.
Like just punch me in the face. Yeah, because
Right.
that'll feel better.
But then
Like,
to go from those words coming out of his mouth to Homer, and immediately we hear Roy Lee getting hit by his stepdad. And all we
mhm.
know prior to this is a throwaway line Homer says where it's like, your stepdad is the biggest drunk in Coalwood,
Yeah.
um, working in the mine and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we go from him saying, you know, I'm ashamed of you, to we hear what's going on with Roy Lee, and he just looks at Homer. He's like, get in the car, and he goes over and he defends Roy Lee.
Mhm.
And that right there tells you exactly who John Hickam is in this movie, who that character
Mhm.
is. He will stand up for someone who can't defend themselves against
Mhm.
someone else because he's a good person. And Homer knows
Right.
that. Homer knows what a good man his father is. He just doesn't agree with
Mhm.
him.
Right.
So it was this great emotional backbone. Same thing with the mom. Natalie
Oh, I love her so much. I
Natalie
love her so
Cannerday
much.
played
She
Elsie.
is
She
like, yeah, she's just
because like
aces.
Chris
That's so
Cooper is
good.
always good in everything, and I've seen her in
Yeah.
some stuff too, and she is always great.
She's
And
yeah.
in this instance, she plays Elsie perfectly because she is 100% the mom, and she loves her husband, she loves her kids,
Mhm.
she wants to defend all of them, but she also sees like
She's so
she sees
frustrated.
the oh yeah the
Mhm.
frustration, and she sees the negative. She sees, you know, John makes mistakes, she knows that,
Yeah.
but she knows that he's a good man, and but she also knows where the line is and what buttons she can push to get him to
Mhm.
shape up. And when she comes to him and tells him like, I will leave you, and that was another one of those really great emotional moments because she's serious. She tells him
Mhm.
that, and she's serious, and when he says, well, where would you go, and she's like, Myrtle Beach, and then she leaves,
Uh-huh.
and there's just that little grin on his face of like,
Yeah.
because you can see in his face, John knows at that moment, son of a bitch, she will do it.
Yeah, well, not just that, but like, and it took me seeing the movie like 4 times to notice that that's where they were married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so she's wanting to go back to that. Now, I did a little digging, and I was like, because I mean, first of all, okay, so you're from Michigan, right?
Yep.
Right? Okay. Did that line hit you as funny? Because it's like, like who's going to retire to Myrtle Beach? Come on. But the thing is, like in the 50s, that was the hot place on the East Coast.
Oh yeah.
And I looked into it, and it was actually established as a city in 57. Before that, it was all an Air Force city until it grew. And okay, so you say Homer, he's old enough to, granted this is 50s in West Virginia, but he's old enough to sign out of school without his parents. Okay, just of his own volition, he's
Mm-hmm.
gone. Um, and so figure he's 16 or 17, and so it's 1957. So she had him around 1940 or 41. Well, in 40, it was established as an Air Force base.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if like her dad was in the military or something, because I will tell you, Myrtle Beach is a long ass drive on state highways
Oh
and
yeah.
US highways from Coalwood, West Virginia. That's probably a 15-hour drive.
Hmm.
And so there had to be good incentive for that to happen and for them to be able to get married there.
Yeah.
And actually, in real life, they when Homer Senior died, John died. They scattered his ashes on Myrtle Beach. So I think he was also smiling, and I finally realized because like that was a special place for
Yep.
them, and that's how he knew because she just went for the like she just went for it. She was like,
Yep.
you know, I will leave you and go to our special place without you. F you,
Yeah.
guy. Like,
Exactly.
and it's just so great. But when I saw that in theaters with my friend, we were like, do you think people in like California got that joke as the joke that it's meant to be? Because
I don't
again,
know.
at the time, like, but since again, you know, I've heard that that's where they're married and all of that. I still think it plays either way. But like, man, what a way to tell a guy off, you know?
Yeah. Well, and two, like she's a great character because John is the mine, the company man, working man, works the mine. She stays at home, but she's also not. She's not a like a solely, oh, I'm a married woman to this guy and that's all I do is take care of the house. Like she's an artist, right?
Mhm.
We get to see her painting and we see that mural she's painting in the kitchen
Yeah,
um over time
of the
grow. And
beach.
so
Yeah.
yeah, of the beach. And there's some of that where she fosters the like chasing your dreams for her kids because
Mhm.
she wants that for them, because maybe she doesn't get she gets the outlet of like painting on the wall, but maybe she wanted to do that more. And so because there's a lot of parents and people doing a little bit of wish fulfillment through these boys too. um
Sure.
you know john John does that. Even Miss Riley, played by Laura
Oh, for
Dern,
sure.
is doing a little bit of that. And we kind of, it's interesting, right? Because when that first came about, when she first had the conversation with him, and was telling him like, you can do this and all that, and then it gets revealed that she had was it Hodgkin's disease, I
Yeah.
think. Um, and that reveal, and now you kind of understand why she pushes for the unlucky
Mhm.
ones so much, because like she doesn't know how much
Mhm.
time she's got, and she wants to try
Yeah.
and foster that in as many people as she can. I liked that because it
Mhm.
made her reaction to him quitting school to go work in the mine make more sense to me. Because at first I was like, man, that she's giving him the real cold shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of like I got it, but that was kind of rude. Like, you know, at least say
Yeah.
bye to him. Jeez.
Hmm. Yeah. And then when the reveal is that she's sick, I understood that a little bit more. But
Hmm.
then, she does come around
Sure.
and everything goes on. So she was great. The boys, all four of them. So we mentioned Jake Gyllenhaal, but Chris Owen
I
played
love
Quentin.
him.
Chris Owen is
Yeah.
great. And Quentin was such
He
a fun
just
character.
nails it. Just nails it. I love how he was so good. He didn't just like especially when Homer would go off and like when Quentin could see the fire in Homer's eyes or like just hear him getting like facts right and all of that, he would just stare at him like, yeah, let's go.
Yep. Yeah.
He was a trip. I loved him. He was great.
Oh, he was super fun. Chad Lindbergh is Odell.
Odell
I
was great.
most I most know him as Jesse in the first Fast and Furious movie, the only Fast and the Furious movie that I've seen so far, actually. But I've
Same.
seen I've seen Chad Lindbergh in a few other
Good
things, and
one. Yeah.
he's good. Um,
Mhm.
I kind of like how his character had that limp, and we never really get a full story of exactly where it came from. It was just like
Yeah.
a character trait that I
Mhm.
thought was kind of cool, because we
Yeah.
don't learn a ton about their backstories. But
No,
it's
not
it's
really.
not important either. Like it's not integral to
True.
this story.
Mhm.
We get a little bit of Roy Lee, who William Lee Scott that played Roy Lee. Um, I
Yeah,
like
that
him
was
a lot.
I love
Now
yeah, he's great.
I know him from the movie. Identity, with John Cusack.
That's
He
the
is
one
in
that I
that.
did last time I was on. He was in
Yeah,
that.
he
Holy
was.
crap.
Okay, so that's right.
He
That
was
was
the
the movie.
desk guy. He was the desk
No,
guy,
that
right?
was John Hawkes. No,
Okay.
Roy Lee was the boyfriend of the
Oh,
young couple. Yeah.
holy
So
crap.
I forgot that
That's so
that was the
crazy.
movie
I
you were
didn't
on
even
for, but
realize
yeah.
that. That's so funny. Oh
So
my gosh.
it was interesting watching this and being like, oh yeah, I know him from that movie. And then in this,
Wow.
he's great, right? Because like he's not a dumb kid at all. He just sort
No,
of
not at all.
he understands the world that he lives in and kind of where he's at, and he doesn't feel like he can escape that. So he just sort of
Mhm.
is in that world. But he's obviously
Yeah.
smart enough to do the rocket stuff with them and go
Mhm.
along with it.
Mhm.
Um, but he's, it's that 50s era thing of like he wants to be a jock, but he's not tall enough. He's not
Mhm.
strong enough. He's not a
He's
nerd.
just not the right material.
Yeah. Um, but he was good, and the four of them had such good chemistry
Yes, they did.
together, and that's what
They
really
did.
worked. Now, you read the book Rocket Boys?
No, 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 no,
Okay.
no. I had wanted to, and I've wanted to for a while. I thought about it in like leading up to this because I mean we agreed like almost probably 3 or 4 months ago that this would be the movie. So I knew it would happen, but it just it just didn't happen. But I do know some of the book well he said that in the movie the last rocket that they send up, and I know you'll talk more about that later, but that last rocket is named um, after Miss Riley in the movie. And in
Mhm.
the interview, he said, that actually wasn't the name of it, and I probably should have, but I just named it after something from Warner von Braun. That's probably a bad idea, but
Yeah,
but
I read that quote too of like we didn't name it
yeah,
that, but we should have.
yeah. Whoops.
um, yeah.
But yeah,
But
it
I did
happens.
see there was six guys, right? Six friends were the Rocket Boys. And
Okay,
anytime you adapt a story, and especially when you're
right?
adapting
Yeah.
real events, some characters get amalgamated,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and kind of
And apparently,
mushed together.
apparently, he worked like really closely with them and kind of annoyed them because he kept wanting to, like, you're trying to veer off in this direction. We need to go this direction,
Hmm. And
So
it's tough, right? When it's your story,
absolutely.
especially when it's your life, seeing it
Hmm.
dramatized, you want it to be as accurate as possible. But then
Hmm.
from the filmmaker standpoint, you want to tell the most engaging story you can. So
Right.
there's that
Yeah.
balance going on there. So like when I see this, I watch this knowing, okay, these events probably mostly happened. These were real people, but they didn't happen exactly like this. Like I'm sure,
Sure.
things like apparently they didn't actually steal or pull up abandoned railroad stuff to get scrap
Right.
metal to pay for everything.
Hmm.
But that makes for an interesting
Hmm.
kind of side story
Hmm.
and that
That
fun
is
little.
also very West Virginia.
Oh yeah,
Like,
oh yeah.
just saying.
Um, but yeah, like the boys were they were a great mix, and it
Hmm.
made for really good those montages of them going through the iterations with their rocket, and then working in the machine shop and all that kind of stuff was really really good. And all the like side characters too, Ellie Baskin, who plays Ike Bukowski.
I loved
um
Ike. Yeah.
it, Number one, like the actor, he's great. Number two,
Hmm.
I'm watching this and I had a note for myself and I'm like, oh, Ike's not going to make it. There's going to be an
Oh no.
accident in the mine. As soon as we have the scene where he gets where John takes him out of the machine shop for helping Homer and puts him in the
Hmm.
mine, and Homer's talking to him, and he talks to Ike, and Ike's like, no, no, you know what? I make more money down here. I got family back in Europe. This is good for me to be in the mine. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, there's going to be a mining accident, and Ike's going to die. Like
Yeah.
that's going to happen, which it does, and it's super sad. It's one of those things where it's like that's an easy or it's a shorthand way to get some drama in there.
Right.
But it was just a bummer because I'm like, oh, I like that guy, and
For
Ike was such a
sure.
nice guy to help him out
He's
that
such a
way.
sweet man. He's so like when I mean he's the one that originally at least in the movie, he draws Homer's attention to Sputnik going up,
Yeah.
and what kind of awakens Homer to like, and like, and then later Homer says, "Hey, that basically that made me dream, and here's my dream. Do you want to help me out?" And he's like, "I don't know. I'm kind of nervous." And he said, "Did I mention I have a dream?" And the guy's like, "You know what? You know what? You sold me." And and like it's just he's such, I don't even know the right word for it, but he's just so there is such there's such a mentor vibe to him, but he can't like mentor him. But
Hmm.
he's kind of, it's almost like he's kind of willing it around to happen.
A
Um,
little bit, yeah.
and
We could see
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, not nearly to the point of Miss Riley, but it's just he's like you can tell like it just clicks some gears in his head, and it's just so it's so fun to watch him figure out a way to help Homer pursue that and all of that.
Yeah. Well,
Um, I
go ahead.
want you to keep going down the list, and I want you to say whatever else you have to say about Ike. But I want to come back to Ike in a few minutes
Okay.
because as like a side jag.
But it was
So
really
go
what
ahead.
was cool was it was the whole town getting behind these boys, because it starts off when they hike off, they go whatever it is, the 8 miles, and they find that like slag pit that they can use for their launching pad,
Mhm.
and then slowly getting the support of people. You've got the what's his name, who was one of the Red Tails, uh, Bolden, was that his name?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
and Leon Bolden, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That character coming out with his kids to watch them set off a rocket, like,
Mhm.
just because he thought it'd be cool to see these boys light a rocket
Right.
off, and then he's like, "Man, and he tries to help them, and then you've got, like, other people in the town wanting to help them, and even something as simple as, like,
Mhm.
Homer goes to his dad looking for just leftover concrete or anything like that, and, of course, John's gonna tell him
Mhm.
no. But then eventually he's like, "Hey, you know what? There was some got ordered. It got rained on. It's probably ruined, but whatever. Do whatever you
Yeah.
want with that." Like,
Right after he blessed them out, he said, "You know what? Here's some crappy concrete. You can,
yeah,
I guess you can have it. Go have fun, whatever."
right. And so
Yeah.
it's like it's stuff like that that was really cool. And then as the movie went along, and you got more and more people coming out to watch their rocket launches,
Mhm.
and the town, because again, everybody in this town is going to know everybody because they all work in the mine, and all these families are together, and there's only the one school there, and all that kind of stuff. So like
Mhm.
it was just cool to see that. So when they do win that regional science fair, and he gets to go to Indianapolis for the nationals. Like, the whole
Mhm.
town, even though all the miners are on strike, like, the whole town is behind him. They want to help, but they can't. But then they figure out a way to. Like, I just loved all of that. I loved there was a hopefulness to this entire movie that was something great. And it's funny because last week, I talked about a movie called High Tension, which is very dark, very nihilistic,
Mhm.
very, very just a downer movie.
Right.
Nothing great, nothing uplifting there at all. But still
Mhm.
fascinating movie. So it's just, two sides of that coin, right? Now we're on the other end of the spectrum of this uplifting, very Hollywood, very, we've said cheesy a little
Mhm.
bit. There is a little bit of that cheese in there, but it
Right.
works here.
Oh, for
Like,
sure.
I don't have a problem with it. You got Chris Ellis, who played the principal of the school,
Mhm.
Principal Turner, or as I called him in some of my notes, Principal Hardass.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
and Chris Ellis is one of those. He's a great character actor. He shows up in a lot. He's actually in a lot
Mhm.
of space movies. He was in Apollo 13. He was in Armageddon. Um,
Huh.
like, he's always got these smaller roles in a bunch of these movies, especially in this time period, kind of that mid to late 90s, early 2000s. But
Mhm.
even he, as the principal, who's very stern and very like, "What are you boys doing?" The lucky ones get out of here on a football scholarship. Everyone else goes to work in the mine. When he figures out, when Homer has that moment where he comes back to the school and shows him,
Mhm.
"No, we didn't set that fire,"
Yeah.
and the principal
Love that
suddenly gets
scene.
behind him,
Mhm.
right? Because he sees,
Yeah.
oh, this kid's really got something, and he's
Yeah.
willing to, like, he's not sleeping, figuring this out while also working. in that
Mhm.
mine too, which was a
Yeah.
great scene. Like I just love that kind of stuff. It's that town
Also,
rallying
also,
behind them.
also, he found out that it was set from a nautical flick because they
Right.
bring it in, and he's like, you know what, y'all wasted my time and my
Yeah.
students' time, and he just like as he's leaving the office, he just has a moment where
Hmm.
he's like, this is a nautical flare, like what the f, and as soon as he gets outside, he's like, you know what, you're going to have to re-enroll if you want to go to that science fair,
Yep.
and it's just like it's just it's like, he's like, I was an ass, sorry for doing that, like without
Oh, it's
saying
fine.
it though.
Yep.
Well, true. He's not sorry, but sidestep. Hey, I want you to go to the science fair after all.
Right. No, it's one of those feel good types of movies. And
Mm-mm,
I do think that those are what I like about a movie like this is that I can sit down and watch it with just about anybody, and for the most part,
mhm,
people are just going to enjoy it. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing questionable about it. It was just like it's just a movie where some kids
mhm,
try to make something and the town really rallies behind them, but you've also got that emotional weight of like the stuff going on at home. And then you even have the scene where, the right before he leaves for the science fair and
mhm,
the strike is going on, and John goes into the kitchen and then someone takes a shot at him because it's one of the
mhm,
striking
mhm,
mine workers takes a
mhm.
shot at the foreman, like literally shoots into their house.
Yeah,
So you've got that going on. You had the whole thing where, we get multiple times where there's accidents in the mine and stuff goes wrong. When
yeah,
Ilya or sorry, when Ike gets killed in the mine, John is severely injured. And that is the thing that gets Homer, who doesn't want to give up on that dream
no,
of doing
no.
rocketry, but he understands that he has to go and do this because right now, like Jim can't. He
Mhm,
doesn't want to. He doesn't want to take Jim's football dream away from him.
mhm.
So he's willing to do what his dad
Even
did.
though Jim steps in first and is like,
Yeah.
I'm the oldest, it's my responsibility. He didn't even say Homer's not going to do this because he's a stupid rocket dude. He
Right.
was like, I'm the oldest. This is what I should do. And the mom steps in and says, nope, you can't do that because you'll have to leave school.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
Homer's
And
like, okay, I'll do it. Like,
yeah. And that is him following in his father's footsteps and understanding that
absolutely.
is what John would have done in that situation,
Hmm.
right? Is he would have taken that and gone into the mine, even though it's the last thing he wanted to do. If
Sure.
John were in that situation, Homer is. That's what he does. And we get that wonderful moment where he's going into the mine shaft for the first time, and he looks up, and there's Sputnik going over.
Yeah.
And
God, what a shot. And what I saw when um, I rewatched it is like at the beginning of it, because Ike had turned him on, he's one of the only people like looking up in the sky and like just believing it
Mhm.
without even seeing it. And then he sees it.
Yep.
And it's like there's this contrast. Hold on. Sorry, I got mixed up because there's just so much. But that opening vignette, the
Hmm.
opening vignette that is just so it's such a specimen of its time. It's just great. And you see the people hearing about Sputnik being lost and like, well, I guess we lost that war. And and you see the older guys going down in the mine carrying the radio, and the radio is talking about how the Russians blah 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 blah, but watching him go down in that mine and looking up and seeing it as like you said, like a thing of hope. It's just it's that's the kind of cheese that isn't really cheese. Like there was something like super poignant
Yeah. Oh
about
yeah.
that, and I absolutely guarantee you something like that happened. And it's like Johnston. I've only seen one other movie of his, um, and that's Honey I Shrunk the Kids. Well, I mean, I saw Raiders several times when I was a kid, but I don't remember it. Sorry, guys. Um, I'm on the show for a reason. But he did Honey I Shrunk the Kids, and you mentioned the chemistry that they had, and there
Hmm.
are so many. There's like a good handful of these Joe Johnston-y Disney shots of like, especially like when they're doing their first real rocket and they're behind the
Oh, I
metal
love
thing,
that.
and it goes down the row, and it's just bang, 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 and
Hmm.
it's just so classic and in the pocket. And
Yep.
like when they're going up the mountain, um, that mountain and snake route to get to their whole thing, there's just a shot that's just nails it, just nails it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the same director. He made Honey I Shrunk the Kids. You mentioned Rocketeer. We've
Hmm.
talked about The Page Master, which I think is a little bit underrated. It's not perfect, but it's a fun movie. But
Hmm.
also Jumanji, he made.
Oh
That was his
yeah,
movie
Jumanji.
before
I haven't
this.
seen the original Jumanji. I'm horrible.
Um, Jurassic Park 3 better than
That was pretty
people kind
good.
of give it credit
Yeah.
for. Like it's not Jurassic Park, but no
No.
movie can really that's such a impossible order to step up to. But JP3 I really enjoyed. And Captain
It's
America the
kind of
First Avenger is
it's kind
really
of a
good.
story in that world. That's
Yeah.
kind of more of the angle of
But I
JP3, I
think
feel.
that's what Joe Johnston does so well, right? That's
Right.
why I thought he was great as to direct Captain America the First Avenger, because
Hmm.
he's going to bring a story within the world really
Hmm.
well, and that's what you needed of
Hmm.
that movie. So like he's good at
Sure.
that kind of stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, there it's just this all this hope in this movie, and
Hmm.
these characters feel like real people. Like I keep coming back to it, but John Hickam as a character feels good because he's trying. He's really
He
trying to
is.
be. He's a good man, and he's trying to be a good dad. He just doesn't know how, and he doesn't know how to connect with Homer because so everything happens, and
Hmm.
Homer goes to Indianapolis, and he wins the science fair, the national science fair. He
Hmm.
gets the top prize at it.
Hmm.
Sad that he couldn't take his friends with him, but he gets to be the one there.
Hmm.
Um, and while he's there, somebody steals all of his stuff from his display, which was one of those moments where I'm like, they had just no security at this place at all,
Yeah.
and just stuff was
Yeah.
left out. Like that seemed really odd to me,
Mhm.
but
But it's 1957. This
yeah,
is before the proverbial door locking and the assassination of Kennedy, et cetera, et cetera.
yep.
So yeah, I also like, yeah, like just
So, but when
at the same
all of that
time.
happens, and he's calling home, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and you've got what's his name, Bolden is the one that's helped them, but
Mhm.
he can't get into the machine shop because there's a strike going on, and John negotiates and gets the strike over so that people can get back in part to help his son.
Right.
And that was like that's the big part of it.
And the
And
mom
Homer,
straight up said it. She said, "You need to end the strike to help your boy."
yeah.
And like, go mom.
And so Homer knows this, and
Hmm.
he understands his father even if they don't get along. And so I love when he comes back,
Uh huh.
and he's come back from it. He's the conquering hero now. He's got his medal. He's seen his friends and
Hmm.
told them about it. He's seen this teacher and told her about it. His mother, his brother, all the schoolmates, all the people in the town, all that kind of stuff. He hasn't seen his dad. He hasn't talked to
Right.
him yet. And they're
Hmm.
driving through, and he sees him doing work because that's what dad does. Dad is working all the
Hmm.
time. And he tells his
Yeah.
mom to stop. He gets out and goes to talk to his dad. And John, to his credit, is like, good job. You did good, all of this kind of stuff. But he's just sort of, about it at the same time.
Hmm.
And because in John's mind, Homer doesn't look up to him.
Right.
Homer doesn't see him as his hero.
Hmm.
Homer's hero is Werner von Braun and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And that moment where Homer talks to him, and he's like, and he tells him, no, like he's a great scientist, but you know the thing with us is we don't necessarily see eye to eye, but it's not because we're different. It's because we're the same underneath. Like,
Mhm.
I'm like you,
Yeah.
and that whole that moment, and here I am watching this
I
movie, and
love
I'm
that moment. Yeah.
starting to tear up, right? Because
Mhm.
he's telling him this man was a great scientist, and I do look up to him for the science aspect of things, but like, I'm like you, we're both hard headed, and I
Mhm.
just hope that I can be as good a man as you.
Yeah.
And there was multiple times in this movie where there was a lot of great acting done without any dialogue. There was so many good
Absolutely.
reaction shots from Chris Cooper,
Mhm.
from Natalie Cannerday, from Jake
Mhm.
Gyllenhaal, where somebody would say something, something would happen, and you could just see
You can just
everything
see
on
it
their
happen.
face in
Yeah.
that moment. And
Mhm.
when Homer tells him, I want to be as good a man as you see it on John's face. Chris Cooper
Mhm. Yeah.
just just rips your heart out at that moment.
Yeah.
And it was such a great thing. And for him to then be like, hey, we're gonna, we got one more rocket launch, because that was the other thing, right? Is everybody has
Mhm.
been supportive and everybody's been there except his dad. Like
Mhm.
the one person that he keeps asking
Mhm.
doesn't show up. And that was when I really started to tear up and start crying, was
Mhm.
at the end when they're getting ready to launch it, and they're doing their final rocket launch. And I love this scene, right? Because we've had
Yeah.
so many of these throughout the movie of them doing rocket launches and more people
Mhm.
showing up, more and more townsfolk coming out to watch it. And this last
Yeah.
one, everybody's there. They're getting it all set up, and Homer goes over, and it's such a Hollywood moment, right? He goes over and
Oh,
he's
for
addressing the
sure.
crowd, and I want to thank this person and Ike and blah blah blah, and my mom, and like,
Yeah.
exactly what's happening. And he
Yeah.
starts to get emotional, and then I'm sitting here watching this movie and I'm starting to get emotional,
Yeah.
and he's like, and my dad, and he didn't even get to the point of saying those words, and I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
dad showed up. Oh, God
Right.
damn it, now I'm going to start crying. And
Yeah.
sure enough, it happened. And to then have his dad come over and push the button to launch the rocket, and that's the first time that he looks up.
Mhm.
And it's just such a good, just heartwarming moment.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that so much. It just put a big old smile on my
Mhm.
face.
Yeah. Um, we haven't talked about Laura Dern a lot, but she's so like she is just she sells it so well and so deftly.
Yeah. Oh
She's
yeah.
just such a quiet force, not just in the story. In the story, she's actually a pretty loud force, but she's just like this is one of her roles where you can see why she was so popular in the 90s. Like
Hmm.
she just there's just a certain something to her. It's like, uh, 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 I don't want to say lesser, toned down, or any of that, but like she has kind of that Meryl Streep thing. Like she is so good and fit for a, a specific kind of role, not because she's generic, but just because she knows how to plug into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And her and Elsie, Miss Riley and Elsie Hickam are two characters that do so much in this movie and drive so much of it, um, while being quote unquote lesser characters, right? Because they're not the four
Right.
boys, they're not the dad, they're not
Mhm.
the head of the house, but like John might be the one that brought, that worked for the company and made the money, but Elsie made the family run,
Sure.
and she took care of everything. And Miss Riley, Laura Dern's character, is great because here she is this is a teacher, a high school teacher in
Hmm.
1950s in a coal mining town, and she has no problem standing up to the principal. She
Hmm.
has no problem standing up to anybody and being like, these boys deserve this. They need this. She's strong in her convictions. And I love that,
Hmm.
because I think it
Hmm.
worked, because it didn't feel forced. It just felt like, no, that's who this character was. And she had that ability to do these things. And she had the
Hmm.
agency to be able to do that. And I like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I mentioned that I had some notes about Ike. Okay, so we're going to go off on this little side
Sure.
stretch here, and then we'll come back to some more pedestrian notes about Ike Bukowski. Okay, so I have to turn to my notes. Um, when he's talking about his family in Europe who is still recovering from the war and all of that, it's interesting to me because he's saying to Homer, "Hey, I have relatives back in Eastern Europe who are recovering from this war that just happened that the Nazis caused, of which Werner von Braun was an officer."
Yeah.
And it's just like the circle of that is just so bananas. And it's like, because I mean, like he was a horse officer, and he actually at some point became like a junior SS officer.
Hmm.
And he's just I I appreciate the fact that he's kind of kept in a vacuum here because that's all Homer knew.
Hmm. Exactly.
Because there wasn't, despite the fact that Quentin sounded like one when Homer said, "Hey, teach me literally everything." It sounded like he didn't just say, "Okay, so it started out like this." Like he just went right into it, like in 10,000 years ago, the Chinese, blah 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 blah, and it's just so impressive. But
Oh yeah.
he he uh he he just knows Warner von Braun as the scientist and as
Hmm.
this man who did this work. And like even with obviously, this modern mentality that's like, "Hey, let's look at this guy," and there's still more to say. But like I appreciate that stayed true to that story. Just like when I was watching the movie, it has that moment where they're putting up the flag on their little launch site, and it's like a straight up um, homage to Iwo Jima.
Yeah.
And I saw that, we watched this, and I was like, not the Iwo Jima reference, but that was 1957. That was only 12 years after that happened,
Hmm.
and the monument went up closer than that. And like that's no different than, us kids in the 80s or 90s emulating stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even something as like as generic as like making your own medal podium and pretending you're on the Olympics. It's the same thing.
Hmm.
You're just trying to, especially in West Virginia. I guess we'll get into that real quick. But especially in West Virginia, like Rust Belt, anything. I've been to West Virginia. I've been to Pittsburgh. I've been to Ohio. My ex-wife is from Ohio. I've been there several times. Akron, what's up? Um, but not Akron, Barberton. Um, but like her dad is from Ohio. Uh, my current partner's dad, or her mom, is from the same area in Ohio, so I know the Rust Belt mentality.
Hmm.
And there's so much. I mean, even Odell says at some point um, about I want to say it's Odell about about being um, about feeling outside the world,
Yeah.
outside of Coldwood, and just how it's just completely different. And but like being in that at that time is just, it's such a distant land now.
Really is.
And like I was there for like a few months, and I drove around, especially at night, a lot, just on back roads and just doing a lot of thinking. I was 25. This is what you do.
Mhm.
And one night, never forget this. One night, it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. I would literally drive around till like 6 o'clock in the morning and go to class the next day, or at least one of them. And one night I was out at 4 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't tell you where I was, but I was in one of not the full valleys, but kind of one of those middling valleys. Again, if you played Fallout
Sure.
76, you know what I'm talking about. They're all over
Mhm.
the place. And so I'm in one of those, and there's like a little clearing, and I realize that it's a small mining community.
Mm.
And it's like and it's kind of like one of those isolating things, because on the one side, you have the entire ridge, and it's
Yeah.
like this 500-foot cliff and all that, and all of the mining stuff attached to it. And then on the left side, you have all of the row houses,
Yeah.
and you see some lights starting to come on. And it's like probably a block large, and that's it. And it's just like no matter what I think about like green energy or whatever, there is such and like whatever you think about their reasoning for staying with coal mining or whatever, like people in it, because like holy crap, what a terrifying job,
Yeah.
especially
Ugh.
now.
Ugh.
But like was such I was overcome with such a sense of like heroism, because like who has the guts to do that? Especially
Yeah.
now when you can get pretty much any job you want. I don't know about in that valley, but it looks like that valley was just established for the coal mine. So I'm not sure that would still be around.
Right. No, it was interesting. I do want to mention I like the fact that, you could have made the whole thing with Werner von Braun be like a wedge between um Homer and his dad in some way.
Yeah,
And it
it
wasn't.
kind of hints at that a couple of times, because like Homer doesn't really mention von Braun to John a lot, but John mentions him several times in some backhanded, smart ass comments, and it's
He
like,
does,
yeah,
but
and
I
it's like,
wonder, like I wonder if John doesn't really know who Werner von Braun is necessarily. And so in his mind he's just this science guy, and he doesn't work,
right.
and that's why Homer, like,
He probably has soft hands or whatever they used to say.
right. And so,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
my whole thing is like it is a point of contention between the two of them, but the whole fact that he was German, and that, we're not that far
He
removed
does
from
mention
World
the
War
German
II.
several times. Yeah, going back to my previous comment, there is, I mean, in this case, he's not wrong.
Yeah, right,
Um,
exactly. But it's not a driving force behind it, because I
mhm,
just don't think like it mattered to him
yeah.
necessarily, because it just wasn't on his radar. It was just, no, he's just a science guy. And
Mhm,
there's that moment where, and again, it's like that happy moment for John, where here's Homer working in the mine, and he's working with him,
mhm,
and he's telling him like, all these men, they listen to me. You know why they listen to me? And Homer's like, because you know more than them. He goes, you're damn right I do. He's like,
mhm,
I was born for this job,
mhm,
and you were too.
yeah.
And the
And you
look on
just see
Homer's,
his face fall.
mm-hmm,
It's just like, oh, this shit again.
yep. And that's when he kind of has that last moment of like, I've got to do something about this, because I don't want to end up working in this mine for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
however long that will be. And so,
Mhm,
yeah, it was that emotional weight of everything, and
mhm,
it takes a good acting performance to
mhm.
carry that, and Chris Cooper does it, and he
Nails it.
made Jake
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal better in this movie, and I think by
Absolutely.
extension made him a better actor. I really
Mhm.
do think that.
That piece of advice that you raised earlier,
Hmm.
in that little clip that we both watched, guys, hold on, let me deal with my cats for a
All
second.
right.
Guys, can you
Yeah.
all? But he just hold on. Oh crap! No, I did lose my place. We were
I mean, it
talking
was
about.
great. It was great advice.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Jack Gyllenhaal said that was the single most important advice he had ever been given.
Hmm.
Like, and that
Absolutely,
he
I
was
can see that.
so grateful. I don't know if that's like personal advice or as an actor, but he was that is something I've carried with me all the time. And like you said, it's something that I even use in life. And like
Hmm.
I notice if something is kind of going wonky between me and somebody else, it's like, am I listening?
Yeah.
Um, You mentioned his facial acting. So much glaring from Jake Gyllenhaal. It's like,
Oh yeah.
oh, that's why you got Donnie Darko.
Right. Yeah. No,
It's just so
there's a good bit
yeah,
of
it's
that for sure.
just bottomless. Just you can tell his just brain is just shut off and just not even angry, but just like what the hell is going on?
Hmm.
And it's just him getting across that disdain is just
Yeah.
so good. Um, it was so one of my friends from high school that was in the movie I'm still in contact with, and so I messaged her and was like, "Can you tell me anything about being on set or anything like that?" And she said that there weren't any huge takeaways, except that now she has very, very kind of frizzy, curly hair more than mine, and it's
Hmm.
very thick. And she said that the standard protocol for everybody was to tell the ladies to sleep with like a dep or whatever in their hair all night, and then they would apply some fresh in the morning. That way it was nice and sculpted or whatever.
Sure.
You had your whatever. And she said that her hair was so problematic that she said the makeup lady had like a hold on, oh, wait, had like a bandolier of hair gel. And she just kept applying it. And she said that when she tried to get it off that night, it took her like scraping her hair off into her sink. And
Wow.
like it was awful. But she said the only time the producer talked to her was there's a scene where they're at a like a sock hop sort of thing, a dance.
Hmm.
And she was also in that, and she said that she was told to look like she was enjoying herself, and, and said that her partner was told to look like he was also having fun or to stay focused on whatever. But she also said that they were all surprised that they got craft services. They thought that they would get like some some sandwiches or whatever, but she said they got full run of the table. Like they were eating. Now, this is 1999 in East Tennessee. Knoxville is not a small town by any means, but
Sure.
I mean, I live in Savannah. Well, Savannah's about the same size, but it's not Atlanta.
Hmm.
And and so like they were like the high school kids eating sweetbreads and sushi and
Right.
like really good cheese and like just going crazy. And I said, I don't know how it goes in the industry, especially then, but Joe Johnston has made a lot of kid movies. And so maybe there's a thing that if they have to borrow anybody from a school or anything like that, somebody who's not on the union ticket, so to speak, they get to enjoy being kids on a movie set. And so they get full run of the table. They could do whatever. They aren't second class kids. And by the way, a reason Stephanie reminded me of this, and I kind of remember this, but our band director told us straight up that the reason that they jumped at having the Central High School band, go Bobcats, was because their old band director wrote the fight song, and so there weren't any royalties to
Oh,
pay. And so they're like, hell yeah, we'll get that free crap in here. And
I mean, look, if there's
I
one
mean,
thing I
yeah,
know
why
about
not?
making movies, if you can get something without paying
Yeah,
for it,
if
you're
you
going to do it.
absolutely, especially knowing how much travel there was. I mean, like the places in East Tennessee weren't crazy far apart. It was like a good like 150-mile radius, which I mean
Hmm.
for shooting movies it's not bad. But like they did do some in West Virginia and such, and just yeah, you don't know, but that's yeah, that's a good point. Um, but there was one more thing. Um,
I also, while you're thinking of that, I did like that there was a little bit of a love triangle that again was there, and it gave a little bit of depth and a little bit of flavor to some characters
yeah,
without having to be like this focal point
that
and
first
making it
girl's a
into more.
turd though,
Well,
because
yeah.
she's like, oh hey, you're pretty smart, you're firing rockets. I think you're pretty cool. And then, like, he gets arrested, and she's like, I'm not having that shit. And, like, at the dance, like, he sees her and he walks up to her and he's like, oh, hi, so and so. I forget her name. And because I don't like her. And, and he expects her to say, oh, hi, Homer. But, hi, Homer. But, like,
And she's there
but
with his brother.
she says, "Oh, look, Jim, look who it is," and it's
Mhm.
like that's like just death. And
Yeah.
and then you have the quiet Molly Ringwald character,
Mhm.
and she oh my god, when she I can't I almost wonder if this was a PG-13 movie that they walked back to PG, because there's a couple of good
Oh,
lines from Chris
definitely.
Cooper that were definitely a goddamn, and he reworked it. And
Mhm.
there's this whole non-kissing scene
Yeah.
when the other girl like draws into, and there's like in my mind, every time I see the close-up of her face, it reminds me of the close-up of the face of the sprite in Ferngully. It's like that
Yeah.
close, and
Yep.
it's like they're drawing together, and all of a sudden they're sitting under a train bridge. The train barrels through, so we know something happened.
Mhm.
But the thing, like, that's definitely cheesy. But the thing that kills me is she says, "It sure was exciting seeing all your rockets fire off."
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's so bad.
But at the
But yeah,
same
there's
time,
this,
like,
it's just great. It's like,
well, it is
it's,
because Homer's just clueless. He's just completely
it is, he's
clueless.
such, yeah.
And
Like,
she's been pining for him the whole movie. She finally was
mhm,
just like, all right, I got to do something because he's not going to make a move.
yeah.
Um,
So she's like, so let's try to beat him over the head with it.
yeah. And
See if he
look,
pays attention.
as a guy, I can say it's true. We're clueless. I, I could totally identify with Homer in that moment where you can't see the forest for the trees sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
And there was
oh,
oh,
go ahead.
you mentioned Jim and the football thing. You
Hmm.
know, watching it the first few times I was on so Homer walks in and John says, "Hey Homer, happy birthday. Got some good news for you. Your brother got a football scholarship and can go to
Yep.
college." When he knows Homer is pining after college and all of this, and you want to say, what an ass, John. But again, with that weird perspective that we don't have anymore, um, maybe that was John also saying, hey, you don't have to worry about your brother's future. He's good for a minute. You
There's
don't
some of
have
that there
to,
for sure.
right? Because again, it's West Virginia. Like when I was going to school in West Virginia, I had a business law professor from New Jersey, and she was so frustrated by the sense of, well, this is the best we got, and this lack of a sense of preservation that is in West Virginia. And it's just because they feel so seated in
Well,
their
and also
in their tragedy. And this is a shining example of how that just used to run the day.
right, but when if it's all you know, like John Hickam
For sure.
in this
Yeah.
movie, all he knows is work in the mine and high school football, right?
Mhm.
And the few kids that get a scholarship to go play football somewhere.
Right.
And so that's what he's assuming is going to be what happens with his boys. He's got two boys. They're either going to play football or they're going to work in the mine.
Mhm.
Possibly do both at some point. And so that's just what he knows. It takes him a while to sort of come around to Homer doing anything different, and he's
Mhm.
reluctant to it, but at the same time he cares about his boy, and he wants to,
Absolutely.
he
Yeah.
wants the best for him. So, and it
Sure.
takes prodding from the mom too.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that. I did capture a couple clips, by the way, and I want to
Sure.
play a couple of these because I did really like them. We've mentioned her a few times, but Natalie Cannerday as Elsie
Mhm.
has a great moment because we've had to dovetail off the scene you were talking about where here's Homer with that girl. They're sitting under the train tracks when all his friends roll up in the truck and they're like, Homer, Homer, and there was the accident at
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
at the mine. So he runs home, pouring rain, runs into the house to ask his mom what's going on, and she's just staring off and
It's
saying
like
like,
a Stephen King moment.
yeah,
She is
yeah.
just wrapped thinking about how much she hates how much of a dick his dad is.
And the fact that he's always got to be the hero, right?
Right.
And then she says this.
Your father always has to be the big hero. I swear to God, if he gets killed, I won't shed a tear.
It's like,
Mhm.
you know she will,
Oh, of
but
course.
at the same time, it's just so much for her to deal with all the time with him. So I just really, really liked that. I also I loved so when they're going through, the boys are trying to make their rockets and they're figuring out their fuel. We had that moment where they realize their solid fuel, their powdered fuel, it's getting air
Is it
pockets
cut
in it,
in? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and so they need something to mix into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
This is good.
I love Roy Lee saying, oh, well, gasoline, and they're like, yeah, that's a great idea. Sure, why don't we just blow ourselves up?
Mm-hmm.
And they realize they need something. Homer realizes they need something alcohol based. And my note was just, of course, Roy Lee knows moonshiners.
Of
Like, of
course.
course he
Yeah.
does. It's West Virginia. But
Mhm.
I just love that. And earlier in the movie, he had the great line. This was the audio clip. I had that line, that note, and I was like, of course he knew where to get some moonshine. And I love that as they're walking out, a little tipsy from it because the guy had him drink a little bit and calling it rocket fuel. He's like, that rocket
Yeah, of
fuel or
course.
what? I love that.
Yeah.
But like earlier in the movie, when they're just sitting around and Homer tells him, we can't just be hillbillies. And he's like,
We are a bunch of hillbillies.
we are a bunch of hillbillies.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I also love the scene where he has this old, what looks like an early 40s like Plymouth
yep.
piece of crap car. And it's like, think of like your worst Honda Accord that you would have from like the 90s now and just make it like Art Deco from the 1940s.
Yeah, basically.
Like an old rusty Dick Tracy car. And he's having some problems with it. But then like a few scenes later, it opens up and they're out in the woods, somebody shoot a gun. And it's like, oh, they're probably shooting animals or something like that. And it zeroes in on Roy Lee, and he's saying, "Die, you son of a bitch!" And he's shooting the car, and it's like so great because
He's just
like the
had enough
reveal
of it.
there is just
All right. Yeah. So I had a couple others that I wanted to play. I had so we had the hillbillies. Also, Roy Lee had a great line talking about the science fair.
And besides, science fairs are for geeks.
What do you think you are, Roy Lee? What do you think you are?
No offense, Quentin.
Yeah.
Hey, can we? Oh, mercy. I've spent a good deal in West Virginia talking to like natives and such. I mean, like native West Virginians. I never met anybody with the accent that Jake Gyllenhaal uses in this movie.
No.
Like no West Virginian is saying rackets. Like what the?
I mean, it's probably the best that he could do.
Oh, sure. Like he was, again, he got kind of a raw deal for a first role, but in my mind, you hear people talk about how Gus on Breaking Bad, how like that's not a Chilean accent, and I kind of felt like this was along the same lines, not necessarily as hard sold, but it's like, where did that come from? Everybody else was fine, but
yeah, my biggest thing with accents in movies is it's hard to do accents first of all, and it's really hard if you don't, or if you're not given enough time. But also, most of the time, if you can at least get kind of close to it, like
nobody's going to care.
Yeah, they're really not. People from that area will, right? And certain people will harp on accents, but I don't. I honestly don't care unless you're to the level of like Dick Van Dyke and in that movie where
Mary Poppins, that whole thing.
When it's Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins, it's a comical thing, or if you're trying to go over the top. But like for the most part, I don't care because it's hard. It's really hard to do accents. It's really hard to do them
It
convincingly.
is. It is.
So, but yeah, you're right. Gyllenhaal's was questionable, but everyone else seemed fine. I liked
yeah.
him.
You know, you have a good laugh, you go on, and just like with Gus, like yeah, his accent is weird, but that's his voice, and you need that voice for Gus Fring,
Yep.
and so yeah.
Um,
Anyway, that kind of just jumped out at me, like what's
yeah.
going on?
So I had a couple others from Gyllenhaal as Homer that I loved. I loved
Mm.
when he goes to see Quentin at his house and they talk,
Mhm.
and as he's leaving, and he just tells him because Quentin's worried that he's going to tell him where he lives, and he's like, "Don't
Mhm.
worry, I'm not going to tell him."
And I still think you're weird.
They still think you're weird. Like,
Yeah.
love that. That made me laugh. I liked this just because
That's 8 miles. It's not that far.
8 miles isn't that far, but when all you've got is your feet and you got to get there every day, 8
Mhm.
miles is a trek. That's
Yeah.
a couple hours walk
Yeah, it is.
at a fast pace. If you're having to haul anything with you, that's half a
Mhm.
day. So
Yeah.
it's one of those
I
things where it's like when you don't have a car, when you got to walk everywhere, 8 miles is a long way to go.
Yeah, the city in Ohio that I mentioned earlier, Barberton, its area is 9 by 9, so
Mhm.
that would be like almost walking the entire length of that city, and
Yeah.
that's crazy to me to do
Mhm.
that so regularly and carrying all that crap
Yeah, and it's
when it's
metal and
metal.
heavy.
Yeah, it's metal, it's heavy stuff. But again, this was as Grandpa Simpson liked saying, it was the style at the time.
Yep.
Um,
We mentioned this one earlier, but I love this moment with Homer.
What happened?
Whole damn mountain about fell on your head.
John here. He saved your life.
That's my dad.
I want you out of this mine. Don't come back, you stupid son of a bitch. Didn't I tell you to watch the roof, huh? Now, we all could have been killed because you didn't have the sense to look up.
That's my dad.
also, you didn't have the sense to look up. That's kind of a tie-in.
Yeah.
Joe Johnston, he just like, it's not, I mean, this isn't Identity. This is not like, this doesn't have 17 layers of symbolism, but it's just, there are still just these little things that give it depth, because honestly, the movie is kind of what you get. Like, it's
You know
just,
what it is?
what?
Joe Johnston learned under Steven Spielberg.
This is true. This is true.
And because of that, there is those fingerprints around it where
Mhm.
Johnston made, especially in this era, made a lot of movies that were very Spielbergian light.
Yeah, I like, this is such a touchstone picture, I feel.
Mhm.
Like, if you like, it feels like not an alternative universe Disney movie, but it just feels, it's so Disney. And again, going back to the whole craft table thing, it's so generous to the kids in the
Mhm.
movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, and the
Um,
like that him having been under Spielberg, I totally forgot about that. That makes so much. That makes,
yeah.
like,
There's just
that's more to the
there's
point.
Yeah, there's just a lot of that Spielberg influence in what he made, and you feel that there, and that's a moment of it where it's like didn't have the sense to look up, right?
Mhm.
And John Hickam is underground all the time. He's down, and Homer's looking up, and just that kind of stuff. So I love that.
Right? Yeah.
And speaking of looking up, and this is the last clip I have, and this one is great because I have had these moments myself. Is
Mhm.
Homer talking to Ike about seeing Sputnik, and he says,
Anywhere in the world, someone could look up and see exactly what I saw.
I just love that because there's
Yeah.
that wonder in his eyes at that
Mhm.
moment, and that idea that he watched this thing happen, that all over all over the country, all over the world, somebody else could have looked up, seen that same sky and see that
Yeah.
same thing. And just that you can tell there's a wonder and an awe and like a connectedness that Homer has in that moment, and that's what's driving him to want to learn all this. I just love that.
We just got I just got done talking about how like very Disney it is, and kid uh, uh, kind of focus, kind of, and the way you described that, it totally reminded me of I'm pretty sure you said some of the actual lyrics is somewhere out there from American Tail.
Probably.
Um, but like that's it, and
Mhm.
the thing is that's not lost on being an adult. It's like, I mean, I saw this like, I think opening weekend,
Mhm.
and that I was, I think I was 16, and that verve of sharing your dream and following it, and like inviting the kid in you to hope in this movie without making
Yeah.
it excuse me without making it overwrought. That takes
Yep.
a special approach.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like, I think what I like about this is it's not a kids movie. It's a movie that all ages can like. I
Hmm.
talked about this a few weeks back with The Iron Giant. Had that
Hmm.
exact same thing where The Iron Giant it's obviously aimed at a younger audience, but it's not pandering to a young audience.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Joe Johnston is able to walk that line of not pandering and not talking down, but giving something that you could be 10 years old and watch this, you could be 87 years old and watch this,
Hmm.
and you're going to take something good away from it because it's one of those types of movies. So that's what I really took from it. And I'm really glad that I got to finally watch this. And I'm bummed that it took me this long, but at the same
Hmm.
time, it wasn't anything wrong with the movie or
Hmm.
wrong with me. It just sort of
It just
missed
goes that
me.
way sometimes. Yeah.
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 But you
Such a
know,
good movie.
it was something that was important to you. And when I said, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's a movie that is important to you that maybe I haven't
Uh-huh.
seen?" This was the first thing out of your mouth,
Yeah. It
and it's
was it
perfect.
was it was this or Stranger Than Fiction, because I also have a very good affinity for Stranger Than Fiction. That's a very special movie, I feel.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
but this was a great choice.
yeah.
So thank you so much for that. It was a lot of
You're
fun. Very
welcome.
different from the last time we talked. Identity was a very
Abs.
different movie.
Yeah.
Um, but it's one of the things I like. I like
Hmm.
the varied ways that art can come about. Um,
Hmm.
and so this was a great choice. Thank you so much for being
You're
here,
welcome.
and bringing me this movie. And I'm glad that I got to see it because this is one, like, if I'm hanging out with my folks and they want to watch a movie sometime, this is the kind of movie that I would sit down and watch with my mom
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
she would like sitting down to watch this with me.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot of movies that I like aren't her thing, and I totally get that, and that's fine. But this is one that she definitely could, and I
It's
don't think
it's
she's seen it.
it's so like nostalgic is such a charged word anymore, but it's so like in kind of a meta way. It's just broadly nostalgic. It's not for, I mean, we spent this whole show talking about how we relate to almost nothing in this except the relationships and the following your dream, and that's about
Hmm.
it.
Yeah,
And that's the greater nostalgia. It just pulls you in as a human being, not as someone who likes this or that, who wants to learn rockets or doesn't, but just who can plug into that, wanting to not just discover, but wanting to plug into, wanting to contribute to the greater world around you, and having
yeah.
that realization and wondering what you can do to use that energy.
Hmm. And it's heartwarming too.
Yeah.
It's just a
Right.
heartwarming, wonderful film. So thank you
Mhm.
so much for bringing this
You're
one to
welcome.
me.
My pleasure.
Um, so here's a moment for you. If you've got anything you've been working on or anything you want to tell people about,
Um,
feel free.
not a lot really. Just as always, I have my chainmail stuff at extralettuce.com. You can DM me on Instagram or email me. There's a form on there. You know, we I I I I really like really like making custom stuff for people, and the angle that I usually take is nostalgia. Like, sure, I like using your favorite colors or whatever, but if you can, like, when people are like, "Oh, I want you to make this for me," I'll often say, "Okay, well, do you have a favorite thing that you did as a kid, or do you have a favorite place that you've been, or a favorite season, or something like that, a favorite character, like something to." So I don't just make something cool to wear, but something that's like a part of you and reaches into who you are and shares it with the world. Like, that's really my happy place. So if you see my stuff, think, oh, this would be neat to have this. And it doesn't have to be jewelry. It could be like a wall hanging or whatever. Sure, drop me a line. That's
All right.
the biggest thing. So
Excellent. Extra Lettuce on Instagram and Threads, and extralettuce.com. Check that out.
Yeah.
So this show, I do Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can watch it live at either twitch.tv/tvstravis or on YouTube at /@tvstravis. Comes out as a podcast on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So you can check that out. Next week, I've got Matthew Sargent coming back, and we're going to dive into some animation. We're going to do some Ralph Bakshi animation. I've never seen Fire and Ice, and I don't think he has either. And I'm always up for watching something Ralph Bakshi. So I'm excited for that. So that's going to be next week.
Awesome.
So I cannot wait to talk about that one. I'm really
I
looking
love
forward.
Matthew. He's in the Facebook group for the Tadpool, and I see a lot of his stuff. He does some really just excellent work.
Oh yeah,
Really great work.
He's great, and I'm excited because the last Ralph Bakshi that I watched was Wizards, and that was so much fun. So I can't wait to get his take on Bakshi and animation and all of that. So it's gonna be a fun conversation. So that's coming up next time on this show. And if you want to catch that, you know where to find it live. You can also go to tvstravis.com and find past episodes. There's 271 other episodes of this show, not counting tonight's. There's also links to the other shows that I do. And there's a Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS. You can join that. You can back the show for as little as $1 an episode. If that's something that you want to do, I appreciate that. If just listening to the show is something that you want to do, I appreciate that too. So Jonathan, thank you so much for being here this week. This was a lot of fun. We're going to do it again. We'll find another movie to talk about.
Yeah.
And
it was a ton of fun. I can't wait to see what you shove in my face next time.
Excellent. We'll make it good, I promise. But until next time, and until Fire and Ice with Matthew Sargent, just remember to enjoy your movies. It's been waiting.
Prodigious. Prodigious.